The Marvel Cinematic's crowning achievements of Infinity War and Endgame, record-shattering movies, the latter of which managed to, for a time, dethrone Avatar's highest-grossing film, has brought Thanos and the Infinity Gauntlet to the mainstream. For many, this was their first exposure to the famous early 90s Marvel event, the critically acclaimed tale of Thanos' acquisition of total power and using it to end half of all life in the universe. I remembered the comic event well, managing to scrounge up the two graphic novels that made up Thanos' quest that was the event's prequel, read many of the tie-in books, and satisfied myself that I understood what was happening. It wasn't until much later that I realized how much more was related to that event than I had thought. I also realized that the background was far different from what I had thought. Presuming, as was so often the case with more of a quarter century of Marvel history at that time, that the backgrounds alluded to were enormous storylines in days of yore. I was surprised to discover how, in the vastness of Marvel lore, how small it actually was. Oh, don't get me wrong, the stakes are huge. But even just following the Hulk has shown the many crazy ups and downs and repeated themes and big ideas that arise over such a long history. Thanos was on the scene as a cosmic-level boogeyman for a few years, but then that was the end. The resumption of his story and all around him was to take this figure from a dozen or so years since his last appearance and thrust him into the center of everything. Infinity Gauntlet was so much more than I had remembered. It was a revitalization of a dead and forgotten villain into a major force in the Marvel Universe, and the inspiration for a film phenomenon. Many of these quote-unquote documentaries I do are akin to me finding an old trunk and opening it to find something special that I never imagined is within, something which compels me to search deeper. I hope you'll join me on this search, which properly begins by looking at the original role of Thanos. It all started with Jim Starlin's first real gig for Marvel, a fill-in issue for Iron Man, issue number 55. Iron Man isn't exactly known for being a cosmic player, but that seemed to be where Starlin's interests were at the time. Writing and doing the art for the issue, Starlin drew inspiration from Jack Kirby's New Gods. I shouldn't have to tell you which one of them. Yes, Metron. Metron was a neutral seeker of knowledge, flying around on his little chair, and that's what Starlin went for. Apparently, upon seeing this, Roy Thomas told him, "Beef him up. If you're going to steal one of the New Gods, at least rip off Darkseid, the really good one." In Iron Man number 55, Stark receives a telepathic summons from a new character, Drax the Destroyer, the imprisoned sworn enemy of Thanos. If you only know Drax from the films or think of the era of Infinity Gauntlet, when he was easy to confuse with the Savage Hulk in build, color, and intelligence, you'll likely find it as funny as I do that Drax underestimates the power of his mental signal and overwhelms Stark with the sheer power of his mind. He finally is able to inform Iron Man that the moon of Titan is not what it seems. It's artificial, and beneath the surface is an advanced civilization. Thanos, one of the sons of its ruler, Mentor, rebelled and was exiled, forming an army and making trouble. Horrified, Mentor appealed to Kronos, who shared his horror, and so created Drax the Destroyer to oppose him. After defeating the Blood Brothers that Thanos sent against him, Iron Man heads to where Drax is. Thanos has him imprisoned on Earth conveniently, and where Iron Man is rapidly captured. However, Isaac, the Titan computer, and Mentor use Iron Man's chest to blast Drax free, defeat the Blood Brothers, and finally Thanos, only to learn that he's left a robot in his place to distract them long enough to try to blow them up along with the base. But of course they escape. This issue shows the peek into the universe that Starlin had been creating, with tons of lore being dropped, paving the way for this addition to the cosmic storylines. I should add that while Starlin created the characters and plot, scripting was done by Mike Friedrich, Starlin's housemate who frequently did scripting duties for others. One of the moments when he did the stories as well was most of the single-digit issues of Warlock, until Jim Starlin took over that book's writing. Starlin did the next issue of Iron Man with Steve Gerber, but word was that Stan Lee so hated it that it was thrown out. However, Starlin and Friedrich were able to continue the story of Thanos in the pages of their next book, Captain Marvel. Long before the Carol Danvers of the past decade, or of the big screen, this Captain Marvel is a Kree soldier named Mar-Vell, though Danvers appears as an unpowered human throughout much of his pre-Rick Jones run on his book. In Incredible Part 8, I talked about changes to Captain Marvel and the brief testing of the waters with the two-part Hulk appearance. If you have not seen that, a brief summary. Rick Jones wound up putting on these negabands, which allowed him, when banged together, to trade places with Captain Marvel, who wound up stuck in the negative zone. They would swap places for 3 hours, and then, if he hasn't already banged them together, they switch back. The book wound up canceled anyway, but a while later, they tried this two-part appearance by the Hulk to draw in more readers, but it didn't really work out. The series did not continue at this time. Instead, after a one-off appearance in the book Submariner, Captain Marvel's story would continue in the pages of the Avengers, during the events of the classic epic, the Kree-Skrull War. In the issue following the one that involved the incredible shrinking Hulk, actually, a 9-part story arc began where Captain Marvel, after seeing Reed Richards in the negative zone, swaps with Rick and uses Reed's equipment to bring Rick back, thus ending their problems. They're both now in the same universe. But it's the start of an entirely new problem. After Ronan the Accuser makes trouble, a McCarthy-like politician emerges to investigate aliens, causing the people to turn on the Avengers, and the Skrulls to kidnap Captain Marvel and Wanda and Pietro, to compel him to create the Omniwave Projector, a communication device that could also be perverted into a weapon that could destroy the Kree homeworld. The Kree, attempting to use the Inhumans as their army on Earth, instead are driven off and bring Rick along as a prisoner, who is then berated by Ronan the Accuser, who has set himself up as the Lord of all Kree. Earth is a strategic island between these two powers, see, and thus it must be occupied, to take advantage of it, or destroyed, to deny the enemy the advantage. Rick learns from the Intelligence Supreme, the Kree's big brain, that it's been causing tiny manipulations to lead to Captain Marvel being on the Skrull homeworld and for Rick to be here, before Captain Marvel's Omniwave Projector accidentally tosses Rick back into the negative zone. During an attack by Annihilus himself, Rick somehow uses a beam from his mind to drive off his attacker, and soon to return to our reality. The Intelligence Supreme has unlocked this power in him, including summoning up Golden Age comic book characters to fight Ronan and his minions, before finally freezing the entirety of the Kree and Skrull armies, revealing the political persecutor to be a Skrull and bringing the war to an end. But the toll is too great, and the only way to save Rick's life is for Captain Marvel to share his life force with Rick, apparently dying in the process. The Kree-Skrull War was one of the big hits of its era, so after that, Captain Marvel's book was given a third chance, picking up with issue number 22 and working to establish the newish status quo. By the end of issue 23, Rick and Marvel have the same relationship, with a slight twist. Rather than one being in the negative zone, they have one body that changes forms, and the other is present as a psychic presence, akin to DC's character Firestorm, although that character was still years in the future. Jerry Conway and Marv Wolfman wrote the first 3 issues, but the threats lacked the scope that the Kree-Skrull War had that made the characters worthwhile. It's obvious then why Roy Thomas handed the book that nobody seemed to know what to do with over to Starlin and Friedrich to continue the storyline started with their Iron Man fill-in story. Thus, with issue number 25, it's revealed that we are now back to the negative zone 3-hour time limit dynamic, and also that Captain Marvel is operating at only half power, thanks to the treatment that saved Rick's life, making him weaker at night due to the lack of sunlight. But trying to resolve it reveals the professor who helped him was murdered, and Rick has been framed. Even Rick's girlfriend says that he did it. After facing a number of foes, some impossible ones like Ronan, who is still frozen, and Megaton, who is dead, Marvel passes out, and we learn that the Skrulls are involved, including the Super Skrull. But Rick saw through the deception and thwart their plans for the moment, moving to issue number 26. Confronting the girl who betrayed him, she explains about the society on Titan, including the fact that Thanos has since taken over. Since Titan is in our solar system, Thanos feels that Earth would make an ideal launch point for his conquest of the galaxy, and then the universe itself. Super Skrull is reluctantly helping in the hopes of being able to return to the Skrull Empire without being locked up, like he had been during the Kree-Skrull War. On Thanos' orders, he lures the Thing into fighting Captain Marvel, who was hoping to learn some things through observation. In the climax of the issue, he is fully revealed, accompanied by a cloaked figure with glowing eyes who goes unidentified. Thanos shows his power by not only putting the Thing out of commission, but causing Captain Marvel to turn back into Rick Jones. In issue number 27, we see he has done this so that the computer, Isaac, can copy his mind so they can then find the location of something that Thanos is seeking, the Cosmic Cube. You might find that surprising, but so far, the Cosmic Cube, by and large, has been a Captain America thing. The Tesseract of the first Captain America movie can be thought of as a fill-in for the Cosmic Cube. In fact, the reason that Rick gave up being Cap's sidekick was because the Red Skull used the Cosmic Cube to swap bodies with Cap and drove Rick away with his abuse. MODOK eventually got a hold of the Cosmic Cube, but the Submariner claimed to have destroyed it while he was working to acquire it for Dr. Doom. Captain Marvel number 27 explains how Rick knows where it is because of the Intelligence Supreme. During the climax of the war, as a failsafe in case of a further Doomsday War, he put the location of the Cosmic Cube in Rick's head, subconsciously. In the here and now, Marvel is met by Monitor and his other son, Eros, and the three of them overtake the headquarters. The Super Skrull is defeated, and the recording of Rick's mind is destroyed. But even though Titan is reclaimed, Thanos nears his prize on Earth. So Captain Marvel heads to the Avengers, where Rick's girlfriend has already arrived with his ID card. She's been manipulated by Thanos to act against Rick. But inside Avengers HQ, taking the Avengers out one by one, is the one that Thanos used to do such control. The, Controller. A guy who had mixed it up with Iron Man a couple of times previously, but hadn't been seen in years. Meanwhile, waiting at the site of the Cosmic Cube for Thanos is Drax. But things don't go well. Irritated that he would interfere in Thanos' moment of triumph, Thanos unleashes one bizarre form of mental attack on Drax after the next, culminating in this page, which shows that even now, so early in his career, Jim Starlin was a skilled storyteller as both writer and artist. While Thanos takes the Cosmic Cube, the Controller fights Captain Marvel. Seems the control discs don't just give him control over others, it also allows him to draw from their minds to enhance his physical strength. He thus overpowers Marvel and puts a control disc on him. But with two minds opposing it, Captain Marvel is able to easily resist it and remove the disc. But still, he cannot defeat the controller's physical power. Rick is soon seen under the rubble, unable to switch with Captain Marvel. Earlier, Marvel had briefly spotted the cosmic entity Eon, who has swapped them as part of a plan to deal with Thanos, which leads us into issue number 29. Before we go there, though, let's note how well Thanos has been built up to this moment. A great deal has been on things around Thanos. We've seen the power of his minions like the Super Skrull and the Controller. He has been a force behind them. When Thanos acts directly, however, it is impressive. The casual transformation of Captain Marvel into Rick Jones, the way he destroys Drax by fighting in his head, that smile as he takes his prize. Thanos isn't just another big bad. Starlin, who scripts Thanos' confrontation with Drax, gives us through words and art a sense that we are dealing with a serious threat here. And without the need to walk in and defeat Thor with a few punches, as other writers would lazily do. Issue number 29 gives Ian a chance to share more of Starlin's backstory, that Kronos, the father of Zeus, was also father of the man who would one day become Mentor. Kronos' experiments created an accident that made him one with the cosmos, giving Zeus a chance to drive out his brother that followed his father's ways more than the Thunder God had. The future Mentor wandered space until he found a woman who was the lone survivor of a dead world, and revitalized it into Titan, where Thanos has now bound his own brother, Eros, thanks to the Cosmic Cube. But this is more than info dump. It's here that Starlin holds a mirror up to Captain Marvel, the Cold Warrior, and shows him how hollow that title is. It's time that he accepts that he needs to cease being a warrior and become a protector. Ian thus provides subtle changes and gives him a newfound awareness to carry out his role. When he returns to Rick, he's a changed man in mind and body. In this, Starlin upgrades the character as much through personal growth as with handing him a new power set. 2 crossovers happen at this time, both of which I have to admit amuse me. One is in Marvel Features. This is the same book that originally launched the Defenders, but after 3 issues, the Defenders have been given their own regular series. So Marvel Features became about Ant-Man. And then after that, The Thing took over, in fact, right after his appearance in Captain Marvel number 26. It was The Thing's book for all of 2 issues. The first one had the Hulk in it, and the second one is this one with Iron Man, trying to deal with the Thanos problem here on Earth. Iron Man and the Thing wind up fighting the Blood Brothers again, who survived that explosion of the base. The pair of heroes win, much to Thanos' annoyance in his cameo about the loss of a beachhead on Earth. And when Stark exits, the Thing is left tromping through the desert as the series ends. Not to worry, it would continue, but as Marvel 2-in-1, as it would feature the Thing along with another Marvel character, the same way that Marvel Team Up was Spider-Man and another character. Marvel 2-in-1 is relevant because of a landmark Thanos event within its pages that we'll get to down the road. The other crossover is, of all things, Daredevil. That's right, the story of Thanos and his goal of universal domination drags Matt Murdock into things. The only thing that can top that is the way that he is brought in. It's thanks to a character that had been seen as a one-off also in an issue previously that Mike Friedrich had written. The Iron Man issue before Thanos' first appearance, actually. It was Iron Man number 54. The villain of this story had quite possibly the stupidest villain name that I have ever heard. If I told you that the name was even stupider than the name Madam McEvil, well, I would be lying to you. It's not worse than Madam McEvil, because it actually is Madam McEvil. Really. So yes, her second appearance was in Daredevil, where the cover again calls her Madam McEvil. Now, at the time, though, this book was no longer being called Daredevil, much the same way that books like Green Lantern or Captain America started including the names of their partners in the title. Daredevil's title was changed because he was now working with his famous female assassin partner who had stolen his heart. Obviously, I don't need to tell you who that was. So in this issue of Daredevil and the Black Widow, number 103, Madam McEvil and her shadowy partner create a cyborg and order him to kill Daredevil, who fails. So in issue number 105, she beams Daredevil to her ship while he's falling in order to be her prisoner. She now reveals that she is from Titan, hates Thanos, and explains that her ridiculous name was given to her by her computer, actually. But back on Titan, she was referred to as Moondragon. This issue was written by Steve Gerber, although the Titan events were actually drawn by Jim Starlin himself. But please do take a moment to appreciate that even the creator of Howard the Duck thought that Madam McEvil was too stupid a name to use. Moondragon tells Daredevil her backstory, that she's actually a human, born on Earth, but that her parents died in a car accident. The distraught girl was taken in by Mentor, who brought her to Titan, saying that they had unwittingly caused the accident. He couldn't raise her himself, though, and had her sent to a Titan monastery for training, where she excelled. But in the end, they were unaware of what was happening outside until Thanos had already taken over. She came to Earth to find a way to oppose Thanos. She knows that he's creating thralls here on Earth and believes that Daredevil is one of them, and also that the entire city of San Francisco is under his control. She is responsible for some of the recent threats that have been going up against Daredevil, because that shadowy figure manipulated her. He shoots her, actually. And while she's dying, she directs Daredevil to take her somewhere where she can be healed. The problem, though, is that the equipment is color-coded. He can't see it using his radar sense, and he doesn't have time to try to guess the right colors. To demonstrate the power that she has, despite the fact she's on death's door, she's still able to heal his blindness so that he can operate the controls so that he can save her. By the time issue number 107 comes around, that bad guy who duped her has unleashed a Titan doomsday weapon created to deprive Thanos the spoils of Titan if that were to ever happen. So eventually Captain Marvel, who has just finished a 2-issue team-up with Spider-Man over in Marvel Team-Up, has to get involved to help thwart this thing. By issue number 108, Moondragon has spent a couple of months hanging with Daredevil and Black Widow, but finally leaves Earth, so we can eventually bring her back into Thanos' story. And speaking of which, we should get back to Captain Marvel. In issue number 30 of Captain Marvel, Rick and Marvel are anxious because Rick's girlfriend has been taken away by the Controller, who has gathered the people under his control so that they might chant his name in public. Thanos has to call him up to point out what an idiot he's being, potentially blowing the cover on his sleeper agents for this public ego trip. These people are supposed to be getting ready for his attempts to take over the Earth. Marvel soon uses Iron Man's tracker to lead him to where the Controller brought Rick's girlfriend, but rather than attacking, tries to persuade the Controller to see reason, that Thanos is just using him and will destroy him like the others who cease being of use. This new Captain Marvel, one committed to being a protector and not a warrior, only turns to violence when it's obvious that the Controller will not listen to reason, that he is loyal to Thanos because he believes that when the galaxy is conquered, he will become Viceroy of Earth and its undisputed master. The Controller finds out how right Marvel is, though, when Thanos renounces him for his failure and his threat is over. Rick's girlfriend and all the others are freed, just in time for Drax to appear. But in the next issue, when Marvel and the returned Moondragon show up, they see that he's fighting a few of the Avengers. Captain Marvel breaks it up, and after Drax explains about the Cosmic Cube, Vision calls in the rest of the Avengers so Captain Marvel can plead his case, unaware that through the cube, Thanos hears all. He gloats of the order in which he will kill his enemies, before finally revealing the reason that he's doing all of this is the love for the beautiful pale woman with the skull earrings who is hidden in that purple cloak. After Marvel catches the Avengers up on everything that's been happening, Thanos transports his enemies to Titan: Captain Marvel, Moondragon, Iron Man, and Drax the Destroyer, freezing them as he had Eros and Mentor. He has even managed to bind Kronos himself, but Marvel's able to slowly clang his negabands and turn into Rick, disrupting the field that's holding them so that everyone can have a chance to fight Thanos. With the cube, that's pointless, but Mentor doesn't directly attack. Rather, he turns off the moon's gyroscopic control to cause Titan to go flying out into space. The distraction and the shaking allows for Captain Marvel to kick the cube away from Thanos. But he doesn't need the cube to beat all of them, not even Moondragon when he fights mind to mind. With them vanquished, he takes up the cube, imprisons them, restores Titan to its place, and completes his grand transformation into a god, leading to issue 32. Drax makes the mistake of trying to fight Thanos, but while it does nothing more than destroy the building, it does allow the others to slip away, and during the confusion, Marvel grabbed the discarded remnants of the cosmic cube. By the time they reach Isaac, there's just him and Iron Man left, where they conclude that Thanos' biggest weakness is his ego, his need to not just win, but to have his enemies witness his triumph. But before they can act, unkillable demons are created, and Iron Man is knocked out. The only one still fighting at this point is Drax, who stubbornly refuses to ever be bested. So Thanos inflicts truth upon him, showing Drax who he really is. He was not created solely from nothing. Instead, he was once a human man, Art Douglas, who died in a car accident after Thanos noticed that the humans in the car might have seen his ship. The accident, in fact, which led to Mentor taking the little girl back to Titan to become Moondragon. His soul was placed within the body that Kronos had created, knowing that the hatred for the monster who killed him and his wife would drive the Destroyer to defeat Thanos. This point really shows how Starlin has spent a lot of time developing the backdrop of his world. We know that he was inspired by the New Gods, but we can see that he hasn't just aped Kirby. He's stitched together a mythos that has been growing and flowering into this wondrous, complex tale. We'll stop a moment to hop back over to the Avengers with issue number 125, written by Steve Englehart, whose work often overlaps with these stories. In fact, Starlin and Englehart created the character of Shang-Chi together. By page 5, we catch up with the events in Captain Marvel when the Avengers learned that Thanos' fleet of scum and villainy are on their way to Earth. The Avengers head into space, but they've only the Quinjet, Thor, and a ship that they picked up during the Kree-Skrull War to use. But a small group of Avengers arrives on the flagship and discover a universal translator that's allowing all of the aliens to understand each other. Turning it off, the uncomprehending paranoid villains turn on each other. But in the end, Thanos says their victory has only aided him, bringing us back to Captain Marvel number 32. The computer Isaac speaks with Captain Marvel, who upon learning that the demons will fight him so long as he exists, ceases to exist by trading places with Rick Jones. Rick heads back to Earth with the remains of the cube, but Thanos pursues, if that word makes any sense under these circumstances. Knowing Thanos' ego is his weakness, Rick taunts him by saying that only by attaining godhood has Thanos become able to defeat Captain Marvel, that he avoided directly facing the Kree hero because he knew in a straight-up fight he would lose. Sufficiently outraged, Thanos brings himself back down to a more manageable corporeal form, leading to our final issue, Captain Marvel number 33, with Englehart doing the scripting while Starlin does the story and plot. Surprisingly, this climax is a scant 18 pages, with 4 detailing the previous events before we get to the confrontation between Thanos and Captain Marvel. It takes less than 2 pages to kick the stuffing out of Marvel, at which point Thanos notes his fleet that's falling out of the sky. For everyone who thought, why would Thanos bother sending the fleet to conquer Earth if he has this godlike power, he openly comments on that as well, showing that the attack actually had a different purpose: to use his cosmic powers on the Earth while the Avengers were off of the Earth, shifting it slightly forward in time so that when they returned, they would be out of sync with it, like living ghosts now, and thus unable to interfere further in his plans. Mantis has enough control to explain that to Captain Marvel, who arrives where Thanos is just as Drax the Destroyer does, already unleashing his attack upon the now godlike Titan. It is useful only as a distraction, while Mantis and Isaac consult with Captain Marvel, concluding that without worshippers, Thanos cannot be the god that he is. Therefore, despite tossing aside the cosmic cube as if worthless, it is in fact still allowing for him to have this power. Despite Thanos' best efforts, Captain Marvel overcomes the obstacles and chops the cube in half, eliminating Thanos' power, and his cloaked consort, the embodiment of death itself, laughs at his failure. As the story notes, no one worshipped Thanos, not even Thanos himself, because he worshipped only death. This brings to an end the epic Thanos War, a storyline that once again showed the potential of the character of Captain Marvel if only he is put to proper use. And it showed the comic reading world that this villain wasn't some knockoff of Darkseid, but a unique character in his own right, with a strange motivation and an impressive will. That character, though dead now, fascinated Starlin, and so with this being comic books, it wasn't the end for him. But to continue that, we'll have to explore the yin to Thanos' yang. For though he was not present during the Thanos War, one character will be drawn into his world. In our next part, we go from war to Warlock.